Hi everyone and welcome. Whether you're watching this webinar live online or you're watching its recording, my name is Adolfo Sanchez Cuadrado and I'm a lecturer in linguistics at the University of Granada, Spain, and I will be hosting today. Before introducing today's webinar and speaker, let me give you a bit of context. The Arqus Alliance is a multilateral alliance of 9 institutions in the tertiary level, which share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education, and research and mutual fields of interests. Today's webinar is part of the guest lecture series, 9 Months, 9 Universities, offered in the framework of the Plurilingual and Intercultural Hub. This hub is one of the work packages of the Alliance, and it aims to promote plurilingualism within the 9 institutions and to capitalize on students, researchers, and staff's competence in different languages, as well as to foster their intercultural competence, one of the soft skills much needed for today's society. These lectures focus on specific topics related to language and culture and target mainly graduate and postgraduate students, as well as early-stage researchers and academic staff. The lectures are intended to generate awareness and appreciation for the topic of multilingualism, as well as an understanding of the many areas of our lives that are related to and influenced by language. Let me now introduce today's speaker, Professor Martin Potthast from Leipzig University. There he is. Hi, Martin.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Martin Potthast holds a Hessian.AI Chair for Deep Semantic Learning at the University of Kassel. His research focuses on language technologies, search engines, and the analysis and synthesis of information. Martin contributes to the research areas of information retrieval, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence. Martin Potthast studied computer science at the University of Paderborn from 2001 till 2006 and successfully completed his doctorate at the Bauhaus University Weimar in December 2011, where he then worked as a postdoc researcher at the Digital Bauhaus Lab. In October 2017, he was appointed junior professor at Leipzig University, and in October 2023, full professor, thus successfully completing his tenure track. Martin is a founding member and board member of the CEST Center for Scalable Data Analytics and Artificial Intelligence. In April 2024, just a couple of months ago, he was appointed professor of Deep Semantic Learning at the University of Kassel and joined the Hessian Center of Artificial Intelligence, Hessian.AI. Well, he's about to deliver the following webinar, Generative Search and Biases, Challenges and Opportunities of a New Information Ecology. Martin will talk about this, and information retrieval is once again at the turning point in its long history. Texts and images that used to be retrieved exclusively from collections of existing documents can now be synthesized on query. I won't develop too much about the topic since Martin will be talking about it, and I don't want to take much of his time. So before giving the screen to Professor Potthast, I would like to remind you that you can leave any comments or questions you may have in the comments box during the presentation, and I will be there for me to pass them on to Martin. And also you can leave questions at the end of the presentation for the Q&A section. So, well, Martin, thank you very much, first of all, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. And without much further ado, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm welcome and for having me in this nice webinar series. Looking forward to the talk, and yeah, let's get right in without further ado. My talk today is about generative search and biases, as Adolfo already said. Generative search is a new kind of technology that we are facing for the better part of 1.5 years now, where what we are used to know, the basic web search technology, is combined with so-called generative AI, generative artificial intelligence technologies, or more specifically, large language models. And the goal of this technology is to help us search better, which is a nice and convenient goal for the technology to have. And the biggest question of all of that, and since there has been and will likely be a lot of criticism around this, as has been for traditional search engines, we may also ask the question of whether this technology has any influence on biases as we know it or as we are influenced. And I do not want to now start fear mongering about this new technology. It's to me, it is just a new technology, maybe even in many cases even a very exciting new technology. So I want to focus on the challenges and the opportunities also that lie ahead. And this I want to put into context of what can be called an information ecology, where humans and technology act together and in order to further our goals and help us with getting on with our lives, solving our problems and tasks. And to get inside of things, yes, at the center of attention are currently large language models. OpenAI presented them at the end of 2022, and ever since, the world apparently has changed, or at least there has been a lot of disruption as a result of that. Whether or not the world has yet changed is still to be determined later. But these technologies have provided us with an exciting opportunity. We can just give them a prompt, some kind of text, and they will generate a text in response. And that text can be informative. Right from the start, people have claimed they started using these technologies for search, for informing themselves about something. This is in opposition to how we are used to searching the web, like on web search engines and especially on Google, where the usual way of getting information was to just enter some kind of query and then get the proverbial 10 blue links. It's not 10 here, but you get the idea. And large language models are, to a large extent, an interface technology. They give us a new interface to interacting with machines. The machines now start talking as if they were talking our language, and we can express ourselves in our language talking to a machine using a language model. So the maybe obvious, maybe not so obvious idea is to then just change the way we search for information. Instead of asking the user of a search engine to search for a keyword query or some kind, or enter a question and then go through a lot of documents in order to find the needed information themselves, well, why not just ask the LLM to generate a text in the form of kind of an essay or a short excerpt with references to search results that will answer our question and basically relieve us of the extra effort of going through all the web pages if we don't want to, or if we don't see that there's a need for it. And of course, now, what does this imply? Will we get biases? Will we get all more lazy in terms of searching? Will we all be open to much more manipulation compared to before? And what will this do with our world and our society? As our society relies a lot on information, and its posterity, no, its success relies a lot of its economic success relies a lot of information, at least in our part of the world. And I can already give you the answer. Of course, yes, there will be new biases coming out of this. No question about this. There will also be the existing biases in it. And the key point of understanding here that I already want to tell is that search engines have been accused of being biased all the time from the start, somehow not giving us the right thing. The fact that there's a ranking already makes sure that something needs to be on top and something else cannot get on top, and depending on what is on top and what isn't, or what is even not shown in the very small selection of 10 search results among billions of documents, may already be a biased selection. So yes, there are biases and there will be biases. The bigger question is, how do we deal with that, and how do we continue dealing with that, and whether this new development actually improves things or makes them worse. In my talk, I want to go basically through these 3 points: search and how they work. I will give a short history of search engines. I will then do the same basically for large language models, and finally we will arrive at biases and talk a bit about that. And then hopefully all of this will be food for thought, and especially also hopefully interesting to be applied in fields outside of information retrieval where I'm doing my research, and perhaps also informative of other fields of research where all these problems are dealt with on a daily basis: getting information, synthesizing information, and trying to come to decisions. So, first thing, short history of search engines. And I want to start with a question to the audience. What is the earliest search engine that you can remember? The oldest one? Please use the chat. Okay. Not
Sorry.
seeing many messages pouring in. No worries. I can continue without an audience's answer to the question.
Okay, Martin, I can
Maybe
answer. I
Adolfo.
can answer that. Yes,
Yeah, please do.
the first one that I remember is Internet Explorer.
Internet Explorer is this is the tool that you use to search. But what is the search engine that you used?
Ah, okay. You caught me there.
Yeah, I caught you. Yeah, exactly. But no worries. Yeah, exactly. That's all right. But
Sorry, there's another answer. Yahoo.
Yahoo, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely one search engine that is not by comparison very relevant to the past for most of the world. I do hear that there are still some cultures or countries where Yahoo does have a market share. But Yahoo is by far not the oldest ones. Maybe some people have heard of Alta Vista, Lycos in Germany, or Ask Jeeves, but even they are not the oldest ones. The oldest search engines that we know go way back to the search systems that were implemented in libraries. At the very beginning of when libraries started to emerge, shortly after the invention of writing, people started writing things down, be it on carved in stone, be it on papyrus or other kinds of media. And of course, when once something was written down, which was worthwhile writing down, especially when it took so much time to do it, collecting it seemed reasonable in order for others to learn. So libraries came up very early, and Callimachus, an ancient Greek philosopher, is frequently attributed with inventing the first piece of, you might call it technology, but a system of organizing that information that would especially help with retrieving it fast. Libraries grew and collected a lot of knowledge. And of course, going through every document, if you were in search of something which you didn't know which document contained it, would take a long time. So making that process faster is the whole idea of a library and the library's index. So we are looking at the system side of things right now, and everything started, of course, with what Callimachus invented, and it resembles a lot what has then become the state of the art for decades, in principle until today. Basically, the card catalog. A document is indexed with a card, and on that card there's information about the document and its contents, namely some subject terms which are pre-selected from a controlled vocabulary, the author, some more meta information about the document, and perhaps an excerpt, for example, an abstract of the document. All of this would serve to then go to the library and look up in the ever-growing card catalogs, millions of cards in big libraries, the pieces of information that you would look for. With the start of the civil use of computing technology at the end of World War II, the idea the idea was invented of why do all this manually and in physical form? We can just do it digitally and thereby make it even faster. So card catalogs got digitized rather quickly, and well, then something happened, and in the late 90s or the 80s, at the outgoing 80s, the web was invented, and in the end, this changed a lot how information was to be preserved. The index prevailed, though. Google, this was the first, and what the picture that you see is the first installment of Google, where at Stanford, where Sergey Brin and Larry Page just started to download the entire web and store it onto some cobbled together machines from their lab. And on those machines, they also had the index of all downloaded web pages. So basically the same principle, the only difference being that now not a controlled vocabulary, but all terms occurring in the document were indexed. And from there on out, the system did not change much. Even today, there's an index, only it's much larger, as it has to store the entire web or index the entire web. And it is distributed across data centers throughout the world on these kinds of machines. On the user side, so we went from a pre-digital age of card catalogs to digitalization of indexing of information with new kinds of ideas like indexing the entire plain text and trying to weigh the term importance, to the emergence of the World Wide Web, which made all of this manual labor too difficult to scale, and therefore things were simplified, and we were just picking up on the plain text indexing idea again, which was not catching on only by 90s. Libraries were still using subject indexing even in digital form, but the scale demanded for higher ease of indexing, and therefore we just use every word, and this even turned out to be better for searching. So after that, new technology came on. Machine learning technology was introduced rather early, even before language models, and Google introduced something called query log analysis, which I will get to in a minute. And so we went from the pre-digital age era of searching through card catalogs to digitized searching, to the idea of relevance ranking instead of just going through many documents, to answering. On the user side of things changed quite a bit as well. We started out with conversational search, and here people, if they had a question, they would seek out the expert and ask. For example, Aristotle asking Plato, or being educated by Plato about certain things in the Library of Alexandria, as in this depiction. But of course, we cannot always find an expert, and since the experts don't scale, so we need the libraries, and in this regard, things did not change much. We can still go to the reference desk at the library and ask something, albeit the librarian would then point us to the right book. But of course, there are still more complex kinds of researches, and even there, reference librarians do have or did have education also to do more complicated research jobs for their customers. When the card catalogs got digitized, well, self-service entered the library, and maybe some of you still remember using these kinds of nice little machines, the CRT screens with the card catalog on them. And when the World Wide Web got invented and started to grow and become more important, this whole idea of card catalogs was tried to transfer to the web. So people started organizing the web into more makeshift ontologies, not necessarily controlled vocabularies, much bigger than the Dewey Decimal System of libraries, but in any case, quite organized and right approachable. Yahoo was mentioned before as the oldest search engine. Many have used it. It was the search engine to go to, but it was much less a search engine as it was a catalog to be browsed and a huge portal. Whereas, as you can see here, the search engine, the search bar, which now dominates, was not necessarily front and center compared to the card catalog. Google just had the search technology. They didn't have a card catalog, and they were daring with their technology, believing in it, and they then just removed everything except the search bar. And, well, the rest is history. So we went from going to the experts, conversations, to entering keyword telegrams, keyword queries, and getting results in forms of text or multimedia. And well, it may be very well be that in the near future we will go back to direct answering and conversational search thanks to LLMs. Let me give you a more abstract view on this. What has changed throughout the decades, throughout the centuries? At beginning, of course, for lack of technology, we had just had to organize the knowledge ourselves. So all the human knowledge organization was hierarchical, ontological, and people just had to learn the ontology in order to then have an easier time finding a set of documents that would probably contain the answer and going through that. The more we handed things over to the machine, the more things became more associative. We started looking up things through keywords, through keys that we would maybe even learn by heart, refinding things later. On the user side, from starting with a high physical workload to obtain information, going places, going even many places, traveling far, going to libraries abroad, and these kinds of things. Once the digitalization was there, the workload became much more cognitive. We were going to the library, but maybe in the town, using the computer in the library. And with the web coming on, the cognitive workload even diminished further. We could do things much faster, go through many documents at a high pace. And it may very well be that with conversational interfaces like ChatGPT, the workload may boil down to almost just asking the question and getting the answer. At least that's the promise. But whether it will happen like this or not is a different question. Putting this in an even wider perspective, this time looking again at the system side, this development is not a replacement of technology, one technology replacing the other. It is a complementary addition of new technology. We have now 3 systems. We can still go to the library, we can still search the web, and we can now also ask LLMs. And these are fundamentally three different things. However, the majority of people will likely just use one of them. And which one it will likely be the most convenient. And this is something where we need to educate and make people aware of the fact that using the most convenient technology is not necessarily the right thing to do, dependent on the task we have. So there is the task-based speed accuracy trade-off. And the user faces a dilemma, the dilemma of the direct answer. If I get a direct answer, I may just go with it and hope for the best, or I may invest more time in doing research, finding more information about my problem, depending on how difficult it is, and then trying to get to a more accurate answer. And in this regard, we may even face a situation where not everything can be retrieved anymore, depending on the availability of technology or the ease of availability of technology. So some things, the old technology, like the Boolean search that some of us still know, are still around and are being alive and well in certain domains, for example, in medicine, where systematic reviews are being created using plain old Boolean search engine, so that they are more that the provenance of the information is much better maintained. So how does a search engine work in general? And I want to give just a very high level view of how they do work. They have two components, two processes. They implement two processes, the indexing process and the retrieval process. And they have a storage layer where information is being maintained. The indexing process is straightforward. We acquire as much information, as many documents as we can from the web. They have to be discovered through crawling. All documents are being stored in the document store, and the plain text from them is extracted, the plain information. This text is being analyzed, and the text, the document is being represented, embedded, as it were, today into a high-dimensional vector space. This has been always the case beforehand, since the 60s, since the invention of this vector space model. But in the today we are talking about, of course, using LLMs to do that for us. And these high-dimensional vector spaces would represent a document as a combination of the frequency of each term in them, where T is a term. And this would basically be the basis for creating the index. The index is what you can find at the end of the book, usually only referring to all words in a document. This is done offline in the background of a search engine, and online, whenever a user has a question, the following happens. The question is also represented in this high-dimensional space, analyzed and represented, and then forwarded to the heart of the search engine, the so-called retrieval model implementation. The retrieval model accesses the index, uses the query terms or their representations in order to identify all the documents containing them in its most basic form. And then the retrieval model has the task of ranking the documents by their relevance. Relevance meaning by the likelihood of the most relevant document of successfully satisfying the information need the user has expressed through their query. So we have to understand, the search engine has to understand the user through whatever they wrote, which is not trivial since queries can be very vague. These documents, once being ranked, are then retrieved again from the document store, and then what we get as a result is the search results page that we all know, with the URL, the title of the document, and some summary, some purposefully generated summary of the document, usually containing some or all of the query terms. And then we can make a decision whether or not to look at the document or not. This most basic form of a search engine is easy to implement for computer science students. We have bachelor students doing that all the time. And there's tons of technology out there. These technologies are basically also maintained on many web pages. Quite easy to build, actually, these days. However, Google has still an advantage, and that advantage is many users. So what Google does in addition is to, in order to make search more convenient, they record all the queries that users submit, and they record whenever someone clicks on a search result, like here. So whenever I click here, that too is recorded as being as a kind of relevance signal. Especially, it is also recorded how long I stay on that web page. So if I return after a while, or if I return very quickly from a web page to the search result by using the back button, Google also records that. This dwell time informs the search engine how relevant probably the found document has been. If I stay short, the document may be less relevant than if I stay long and read a lot. In this regard, we also support the user by, the search engine also supports the user by specifying or specializing the query. If the query is ambiguous, then suggesting new words might help the user immediately get to a more specific query that helps retrieve better documents. The query log is what makes Google unique because of its size, because they can, using the query log by analyzing it, start a process called re-ranking. In addition to the initial retrieval of like 1,000, 10,000 or 100,000 documents using the basic retrieval model, they then use, these days, a language model which has been fine-tuned using the query log, exploiting all this relevant signal information from the user interactions, and then that language model is used to rank the documents again, so that the language model may interpret the query maybe much better than the heuristic implementations of before may have been able to do. So this is how a modern search engine works, a classical modern search engine. And well, now come the language models, and they are supposed to are proposed to upset things and change things a lot. So in my second part of my talk, I want to give you a short history of language models as well. If there are any questions in between, don't hesitate to ask, or don't worry. We can always skip a little bit, or we can always chat in this regard. Okay, moving on. Short history of language models. So I will not go as far back as translation is. Or let's put it that way: the history of language models is the history of the development of machine translation technology. Translation also goes way back to ancient Greece and before then, but I will not go that far back, but focus on what happened starting at the civil use of computers in the 1950s. Not only were people wondering whether computers might be useful to retrieve information, they were also wondering whether they might be useful to translate information, to translate text, tearing down the language barriers much better, and in order to make it possible for people all over the world, and especially in universities, to gain information from their peers abroad much easier. So at the very beginning, people just operationalized, just like with search engines as well, the process that already was in existence. They tried to operationalize rule-based translation. They tried to operationalize how humans translate based on applying rules of translation using dictionaries, thesauri, and trying to model grammar in the machine. Rule-based translation prevailed for a very long time for lack of alternatives. But the digitization of more and more information, especially in libraries or later on in the web, with the emergence of the web and digital information through network computers, allowed for something amazing. People were starting to put information out in multiple languages, the same piece of information, the same document. So in the 1980s, the idea came up of using example-based machine translation. And this changed things quite a lot and set the stage for what came after. Example-based machine translation is about using examples of translated documents and the texts and phrases within to translate a new, not yet translated document. So whenever a phrase in the to be translated document occurs that exists in one of the examples, well, that example translation from one of the documents we have in store might just be used to translate that phrase as well. Of course, that is not true in the general case because context matters and the phrases to be translated by example were rather short. Nevertheless, it gave a much better quality of automatic translation than the rule-based methods before. Of course, combinations could be conceived. And having lots of examples and a growing number of examples then led automatically to the next idea of doing all of this through statistics of consecutive words. And this led to statistical machine translations and especially to statistical language modeling. In statistical language modeling, the idea is to model language as a probability distribution over all possible texts. And this sounds ominous, maybe to some, but I want to give you an example. A statistical language model is a model of a process, namely the process of how a text can be generated. And that process is easily explained. When we write a text, we just start with a word, and then we write the next word, and then we write the next word, and so on. This is the simplest way of thinking of how a text is being written or generated, as it were. And this process of starting with a given word, writing the next word, writing the next word, and writing the next word can be modeled statistically by just asking a question. If I have written these three words, like I love my, what is the most likely next word? And this question I also give to you. I will wait for a second or two for answers to pour in if people are interested to share what they believe, what would be the most likely word they would write, or what is the most likely word even to be written for the question mark here. Maybe Adolfo, you have a guess?
Okay. Yes, I was thinking that I would say something like family.
Yeah.
Or job.
Yeah. Things we like. Things we
Yes,
love. Yeah.
things we love. Things and
Exactly.
people we love.
Yeah, indeed. So it's not a bad guess, I'd say, but very interestingly, if we look at an actual search engine which has indexed phrases of this kind and can give you an idea. So we built a search engine called NetSpeak, and I want to just show you the result. Oh, it's not operate. There it is. Perfect. Thank you. So here, what we can see is maybe a bit of a surprise. I love my job. I'm currently doing my job. So throughout the day, most of the day, we do our jobs, but it is still a surprise. What we can see here on this search engine is basically the following thing: we have a lot of these kinds of phrases between length 1 and 5. And we implemented a syntax called a wildcard search, where you can just have some simple wildcards like question mark for a specific word, 3 points for an arbitrary number of words, and some more, to just then look up what has been written in place of the question mark in this case, and how often has it been written. So we have the absolute counts of these phrases in a very large portion of the web, which was released by Google in 2006. And building this search engine is quite an old search engine. Meanwhile, we have built that in 2008 or so, or started building it. We can also calculate kind of a probability distribution, which is then shown here in this ranking. This search result does not mean that this is the word one should write, because, as I said, context matters, but it gives us an idea of what is the most likely word. And if I were to generate a text using a statistical language model based on this idea of just asking for the most likely next word, given the words I have written before, then I would next write job. So, and then comes the question, what is the next word and the next word? And we can play with this, of course, and see what comes next. I love my job, period. All right. So the problem with statistical language models is they don't scale. Scaling means that we cannot just write 20 words and ask for the most likely word and get a representative answer of that statistic. In order to calculate the probability of the most likely or the second most likely next word, we need a lot of text. So at current currently the biggest context of words having been written has been 5 words so far with published corpora. We do believe that Google is going a bit further than that, but I do not believe that people have gone beyond 10, because at some point and this can be calculated. One will need so much text that it cannot be stored on even if we had every atom in the universe at our disposal. So there's an exponential explosion with this regard. In this regard, in terms of getting enough data to calculate the likelihood of every possible word that could be conceivably written here in place of the question mark. So we need something more efficient and effective, and that is neural language models. To put it in a nutshell, a neural language model is an approximation of a statistical language model. And how does it do so? Well, it models, it takes the model of the neural network, like the network of neurons, connected neurons that we have also in our brains. Not to say that this is the same thing, but it's closely modeled after that. And it has parameters. Many parameters, actually, millions, billions of parameters. People are toying around with these kinds of numbers for a long time, and it all seems very large. Occasionally, if you hear people saying a neural network has a billion or hundreds of billions parameters, but by comparison to statistical language models, it's actually quite small. It's very, very efficient. We need this many parameters to get the neural language models to work properly, in the sense how we want them to work, being able to speak to us and understand us to some extent. However, we do not need as much as we would need for a statistical language model to do the same feat. 2018 saw the introduction of GPT, and then developments on GPT at OpenAI moved on, leading up to ChatGPT, and I don't need to reintroduce ChatGPT. It has 175 billion parameters, and yeah, I want to give a very quick idea of how ChatGPT actually works. It is based on much less text than a search engine, just 750 gigabytes in total. The parameters I just mentioned, and of course, a lot of labor went into it and money to train the model on a large cluster computer. This led already in June 2020 to the model called GPT-3, third successor in the GPT series, which was able to generate text quite well. And it was able especially to answer questions. It was fine-tuned to answer questions. All kinds of questions, world knowledge questions. So can the model answer whether what city is in northwest of Ohio? Yes, it can. It can answer common sense questions. Why do animals don't have 3 legs? Well, they would fall over likely. And it maybe also can do some part of some piece of logical reasoning, like figuring out if I tell a story of how many pencils are in a box and how many pencils I add, that the final number of pencils in the box. The problem with this model has been that it has been too limited for people to use in practice. People do not always have these kinds of very specific questions for which a clear-cut answer can be given. So this model was not as useful as they thought. It wasn't a replacement for Google, or not even a contender for that. So OpenAI had to move on. And the idea that they had is to also train the model on instructions. People don't want to just ask questions; they want also give instructions to the model and get the task they have solved. For example, write an essay on or something like that. And they collected like 48,000 instructions through crowdsourcing and used those to create a version of the model called InstructGPT in January 2022. But this model, too, was not very useful since if you talk to it, it could be quite condescending. It would look down on the user and make fun of them, especially since, of course, a lot of web text went into it. We know all how the web can be like, depending on which corner one is in. So an additional piece of technology or piece of controlling technology was introduced, namely the guardrails. Since the model could be instructed now, it could also be instructed to be nice. So in addition to what the user submits for instructions are added to that to the user instruction, which tell the model to be nice, to be helpful, and further things that make it a nice conversation partner, hopefully, and a helpful conversation partner. And now comes the problem with the biases, because given the fact that there's so little text by comparison in there, and that there's instructions, even also not that many actually, being used to train the model to understand what an instruction actually is and how to react to one, and an even smaller set of guardrails which encode how the machine should behave toward us, but also may encode certain values. So, for example, counteracting certain racial biases or other things. So, and all of these are entry points for biases, much more so than with search engines before, because there's just so little information that goes into these models. And the question then, of course, is who decides what goes into it, and why is it not being public? Or publicly discussed. So this is where we now lead over to biases with one interjection. I want to give you a perspective of language models in terms of search. There's a nice fictional story of Jorge Luis Borges, The Library of Babel, where he imagines a fictional library, an endless library where there are books, endless rooms full of books, where every possible text of all letter combinations have been written. So even the book containing only A's for pages on pages, but also books which contain meaningful text. And Borges also imagined people living in that universe of a library, as spending their lives searching and finding for meaningful text fragments and trying to interpret them, making sense of the word. And yeah, quite a bit of story around that. It's a short story by Borges, but the point I want to make here is that while people have been searching that library, indexing it is out of the question, actually, because it's just an endless library. However, with language models, this may just be the index for the Library of Babel that we have been searching for. A language model, given an instruction, retrieves a text that may be part of that library or is part of the library by definition, since the library contains text with or from all letter combinations, that fits the instruction. There may be an endless number of fitting text. The language model does not give us all text. It could be instructed to give us more different examples, but at the very least, it gives us one relevant answer. So in this respect, we also think of language models as being a kind of infinite index for which we are still lacking retrieval technology that would help us to actually get to the documents that are not just the most likely documents, but also the most useful documents. So there we have new technology coming at us, helping us navigate this infinite space better. So finally, and coming to an end, biases. Since time has already been progressing very fast, and I will not go through all of what I've prepared, but at least give you the gist of all of it. How does all of this lead to biases, or how does all of this affect our human biases? The first thing we need to understand, what are biases in the first place? And there are actually three kinds which are being distinguished apart from the biases in data that are due to selecting pieces of data and not selecting others. There's the statistical bias, which is a useful tool also in statistics, which means we see a systematic deviation from the expectation. Like, for example, if we have made a systematic measurement error in a measurement, then we see a bias towards that error. There's inductive bias, and this is instrumental to machine learning. Without inductive bias, machine learning and large language models by extension could not exist. It is the learning bias of learning from examples, as we also do. And it could be more colloquially named as being the assumptions that we made or that we put into a machine learning approach that help the approach learn. For example, one huge assumption is that the simplest model is always the best one. Basically Occam's razor. So this is a form of inductive bias that is introduced in model. So we always must make assumptions, and without making assumptions, if every result could be equally likely, we could not learn. And this also extends to humans, actually. We are also making assumptions all the time in order to cut corners and learn something from examples rather than just by following rules. And then there's the third kind of bias that mostly affects humans. It is the cognitive bias. I want to go into this direction and relate cognitive biases to information gathering and especially also to search. So there's a huge list of cognitive biases which have been found how humans fail to think properly, fail to think in a way that leads to rational and useful answers. And these has been started by Kahneman and Tversky and since extended through psychological studies and organized very nicely on Wikipedia here. You can actually go here and look at all the different biases and figure out how we are all thinking in the wrong way. And the fun fact is that even if we know that there is a cognitive bias and that we are facing that, even if we learned a lot about the cognitive bias, we may not even be able to avoid it entirely, even with perfect knowledge about that. So what kinds of cognitive biases exist? Well, it is about not remembering things. These are the groups of biases not remembering things. We have biases relating to overload of information. So we need to filter, and by leaving things out, we may leave things out that are important. We have biases in terms of not enough meaning, by not understanding something properly, by not knowing enough about a certain thing in order to start making decisions about them. And we have biases when we are under pressure. For example, if we need to make a medical decision fast. So all of these biases, many of those also pertain to search engines or affect users of search engines, as they will also affect users of, and some others will also affect users of large language models as information systems or the combination thereof. I just go into one bias. I've prepared more, but I will just go into this one bias, the confirmation bias. And well, here someone is at the library of all places, having lots of books of about planet Earth, but the one book that they found is that planet Earth is flat. And since the person is from the flat Earth society, having pre-held beliefs about the shape of the Earth, all the other books would not affect their knowledge. The confirmation is in the book right away. So confirmation bias, and I will skip now some slides going further, is also a thing that affects how we ask questions. And you can already see the kind of questions I've posed here at the bottom. Why is a high protein diet the best for losing weight quickly? What's the problem with that question? Obviously, it's a suggestive question. We suggest to the search engine the answer that we want to see. And of course, the way we ask questions to a language model also affects how the language model will answer. So let's see what ChatGPT gives us. ChatGPT gives us a nice little answer here, nicely structured. We can also go to the canned response here. So we learn that if we only eat more protein for losing weight, we are more satiated. We have higher, we burn more calories due to the higher thermic effects. Muscles are preserved, which is a good thing generally for our bodies, and the metabolic health is improved. Also, we have reduced appetite because, well, it's basically a repetition of the first point, more or less. So one additional thing that is one additional answer is given though at the bottom. There's a however. However, it is important to note that while a high protein diet can be effective for weight loss, it's not necessarily the best option for everyone. There is a piece of warning here. This could be due to guardrails, especially on medical topics. We don't know, it's not set, but at least there's even the suggestion to also consult an expert on that, not just ChatGPT. Now let's compare that to the answer Google gives us, even today. So let's see what it tells me. Google tells me, bottom line, protein reduces your levels of the hunger hormone ghrelin while boosting the appetite, reducing hormones GLP-1, peptide YY, and cholecytokinin. Wow, nice. A nice scientific answer. Lends a lot of credibility, I suppose. It's from healthline.com. Can't be that bad. Google has been having these kinds of featured snippet, as they call it, before language models were around. So this is not generated. This is an excerpt from that webpage, and it is highlighted by Google. We could go further and look for more results, but since this is so prominent, why should we? This is what I was saying earlier with the dilemma of the direct answer. We get a direct answer even by just an out of context excerpt, but in the end, we may just be worse off by just going with that. So at least ChatGPT warns us. And now the question to you. Search engines have been around for 25, 30 years now, and we have been using them, and the snippets and the highest ranked search engine has been there. Not everyone has been going to the first thing, but most users do. Isn't ChatGPT maybe even better on some occasions? And this is what I said at the very outset. It's not just fear-mongering about ChatGPT. Now, for the first time, we have an alternative way of getting to information digitally, and it gives us a different view of that information, even if not maybe as complete as a complete web search might be if we do a lot of research in it. So we have an alternative now, and we should cherish that for as long as it is being there, and not the next big thing comes around which replaces all of this. So this is actually exciting to me that this is the case for all its problems associated with it. So finally, who to give the power, who to ask to reduce biases in us? Should we ask the machine to do reduced biases? Should we install more guardrails? Should we mandate guardrails through EU acts or other kinds of legislation? Should we introduce more protections to vulnerable groups? Probably the answer is all of them, maybe yes. But at the same time, should we also empower the user, educate the user through raising awareness, supporting the deliberation of the user by not taking away choices in this regard? Should we demonstrate how it works? And all of this also can be answered with yes. So, but the question is, and this is basically what the scale indicates here. We are moving in one direction, and maybe that direction is not the only direction. So it's really questionable what should be done now based on this technology. And as legislation is being mandated, we need to still figure out, we need to still learn a lot about how this technology will work and how it will support us in the future. This concludes my talk. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm due to thank many people from our group and the groups I'm working with all of whom we are doing lots of research into these directions that I pointed out. Thank you very much.
Okay, Martin, thank you. Thank you very much. Not only for enlightening us on some aspects of AI, but also for giving so much background about this topic.
You're welcome.
I think the audience, whether they're watching now live, or they're watching the recording, will benefit from this huge background that you gave us.
I hope so.
Yes, I'm absolutely positive about this, because it's such a new thing that you sometimes you like that background to see where it came from, to see the way it works, why it works that way, etc. So yeah,
I failed to actually say it, but while you're mentioning it, the interesting thing is that everyone these days, every computer science student with the right training, and every practitioner who educates themselves can train an LLM without problems, a small one at least, or a reasonably small one, just as every student or practitioner can build a search engine without problems. However, what makes both of them useful in the end is not not necessarily just having them or scaling them. It is the user exploitation of user feedback. With the search engine, it's the query log, and with the LLM, it's the user-generated instructions that have been used to train it. Otherwise, if we don't have user feedback, if we cannot exploit that, and this also, I know all the privacy in the implications of that, of keeping query logs private and all of this. This is not to say that this is not to be discussed, but in order to make these systems work, this data is still necessary. They cannot just earn it off the top of themselves. Of course, people are doing research now into language models training themselves, but this again may lead to more biases, reinforcement of same false beliefs, or going into wrong directions. All of this is very difficult. So we are caught in a feedback loop between humans and machines, trying to educate each other. Maybe meanwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowledge has always been co-constructed. It was between people back in the day only, and
Yes.
now it is constructed between people and also machines. So yeah, that's okay. So we have a question coming through. Okay, so Kerstin, she comments that and make decisions about which phrases and terms to choose when I am translating. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a comment.
Thanks for bringing up NetSpeak again. I see also the second message.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing up NetSpeak again, Kerstin. I did not go into deeper into this, but using NetSpeak helps you to understand what is commonly written language, at least on a phrasal level, on the web. At least on the web of 2006, we don't have the data to update it. There's no, since this data set that NetSpeak indexes, we have obtained it from Google, and Google has not since. It was used for statistical language model originally, but we thought, why not make a search engine for a statistical language model? And perhaps the small side issue there, or some small thing that you can also see here. I can just quickly show you if you want to show the web page, the screen share again. That you this way can also look into what kinds of phrases have been indexed here, and in this case from Google Books. So what NetSpeak is for is actually, and we have been using it before language models for years, helping us while writing in a foreign language. I'm not a native English speaker, so I need to educate myself, and I wanted to write more like the native speakers do. So I tried to choose words and formulate my queries accordingly if I were lost for words or stuck into my more limited vocabulary as being a native German speaker by comparison, in terms of formulation, so that I could more commonalize my language in order to make it more accessible for my readers, especially the reviewers who review me. And these days, things have changed a little bit. NetSpeak is not necessary for that anymore. These days, since I'm bilingual, I'm using a translation tool like DeepL to do that, translating back and forth, reading the text in both languages, making sure it says the same thing in both languages, thereby improving the language as well. I'm not using ChatGPT for language improvement, just giving an instruction, since usually it misunderstands what I wanted to express, so I need to carve that out further. But writing assistance is a thing, but NetSpeak is being used to this day, and we are frequently getting emails when it happens to be down for a day or so. Is still used to this day by language educators throughout the world, who try to teach their students more about language while they are learning the language. So this is a nice little tool in between that we have maintained for 20 years now, that people are actually using. So we are quite happy about that.
Okay, good. Okay, let's see if another question comes through. I would like to ask you, while we wait, from the pedagogical point of view, and I was mentioning that to you before the webinar started. It's obvious that students, for example, at the university, are using these tools more and more in the process of uh, gaining knowledge. They don't rely that much on reading books or surfing the net, etc., but on asking ChatGPT uh, because it's faster, as you said. It's faster. It takes away much of the effort of reading multiple sources and deciding on which one you're going to read thoroughly. So I would like to ask you, because you said that GPT always gives you this warning at the end.
Not
Sometimes,
always, but
not
sometimes.
always, but
Yeah.
even if it doesn't give you that warning explicitly, you can see from the way it phrases things that it's quite
Seems confident, yeah.
cautious. Okay,
Sometimes,
so
yeah.
at the end, common sense tells you, okay, this is an option. You always need to check with the experts, an authoritative source. So you have to go there, and in that case, when you do a query, you get the authoritative sources from the beginning. I mean, you may get some websites which are not too, yeah, are not to be confident about. But then you receive answers from institutions, serious sources. So, do you think that using this kind of technology may take away that uh, critical thinking from our students? That which is
I
very
don't know.
commonsensical. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to you're not to trust everything you're told,
Mm.
even though it doesn't say so, because
It
ChatGPT
is,
sometimes says so. But so I don't know. Instead of developing that kind of common sense or lower thinking skills of reading and synthesizing and comparing sources and everything, which prepares you for other tasks, more complex tasks. If we rely on these kind of tools, we may, like our students, which are the future experts at the end. And nowadays we have the experts to check the information with, but what about future when the experts mm, gain their knowledge by means of these tools? I don't know if
yeah.
I'm being too pessimistic here, but I just wanted to to pose that question to you to see what you think about that.
So that there's probably many answers to that, and I cannot give you an authoritative or definitive answer in terms of if things will get worse, things will get better. I think the likely answer is the computer science answer. Computer scientist answer often is it depends, and probably the answer to will things get worse or will they get better, to both will be true. Some things will get worse, something will get better, but all of this is just avoiding the issue in a sense. So
Mhm,
um, uh, from what I can tell right now, the world has changed due to the fact that computers could write, and I'm seeing people being upset about that because what used to be a hallmark of human intelligence and ingenuity, a difficult task to master and a difficult task which takes long years to learn at a level where you can impress someone who is not easily impressed with your writing. All of this is now. It feels like it's out of the window, but it's not. We still have to learn, and it could very well be that and I always told myself years back, and I still say it today, that writing is thinking. If I do just thinking, I skip ahead too much, and I need to write things down in order to think systematically. And of course, in order to educate someone about the things that I want them, the messages that I want to convey, this adds another level on top of that, because you have to then put yourself into the shoes of the audience and do something about this. So thinking more abstractly, writing has been a way of educating people of that kind of empathy, and perhaps people will not just stop being empathetic, I think. We still see other people and want to help them. We still need to earn money by helping other people. And so in this regard, the skill set is still needed, and the outcome for the other people that we're helping with still needs to be worthwhile. So there's the least bar that needs to be taken in order to be successful in any vocation. So from my point of view, no, it will not. It will not get to a point where everyone will just sit back like in Brave New World and just relax and see, this is how it is, and everything's easy. I do not need to think or do anything anymore.
Mhm.
This is a kind of dystopia, but it may also be not kind of a utopia, because just like with the web, where at the beginning everything was easier in terms of not being overwhelmed by advertisement and by other kinds of mis and disinformation, nowadays searching the web has gotten a lot of worse, especially if you do product search. We have done a study on that, showing that basically all search engines are strongly affected by web pages trying to get on the top ranks for product search, where the web pages is just optimized for looking like a nice review, but not having actually reviewed any product. So there's that. But for LLMs, it now feels like, well, they give us a more accurate answer, which may also not be true for long, because again, it's easier to think of dystopies here. The LLM needs to earn money as well for the company it has been created by,
Mhm.
and that means advertisement will enter the generated text as
Mhm.
well. At the same time, we are seeing huge developments in terms of efficiency of LLMs, getting them to local devices, and all of these kinds of things. So, having a trustworthy LLM locally is a much different thing than having a huge LLM hosted somewhere, which I have to basically buy to use, or which I have to, which tries to manipulate me also in one way or another.
Mhm.
So, in terms of how society will cope with that, it's a new kind of medium, and we will have to deal with that just like with all kinds of other media as well. And we will do so. We will find new ways of dealing with this. And I still think it's an additional piece of technology. As for learning, and getting to the point where people um, are good thinkers, reasonable thinkers, rational thinkers, and
Mhm.
empathetic thinkers, this is something where we have to likely also change our ways of how we teach. Because in the end, it cannot be controlled what people do at their desk at home. So these technologies are already being there. The next generation is gearing up to using them and getting on with things easier in their lives. So from my point of view, reading will take a much more high stance, discussing and in-person teaching.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, a very good point you made about not about teaching, but about the thing that now everything is for free. And it reminds me sometimes of these platforms where that started free, and then
Mhm.
bit by bit they start
Yeah.
doing some adverts, and asking you for money, and
Yes.
that kind of so it's
I
uh,
mean, we got to be honest about this. Earning money is not a crime. It's okay
mhm.
for them to do that. It's
Yes,
okay. It's just
absolutely.
how the world is, and
Yes.
we get to have the benefits for a long time for of free beer, basically, for a long time. But of course,
Mm,
I can see how it feels upsetting if a system that we are very used to and that we liked even it changes in that way.
mhm. Okay. Well, Kerstin says thank you for the answer you gave to her.
Welcome.
And yeah, I don't know. Wait for a couple of minutes. Uh, and yeah, it's amazing. I mean, how fast things change.
Yeah.
And I guess that even you, right, or especially you work on the field, and then
I have to struggle to
probably
keep up at all, and I'm
yes.
without my staff and the group I'm working with, which the
Hmm.
pictures I showed, it wouldn't be impossible. It would just be
Yes.
impossible for me.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, it's not a work of an individual. That couldn't be possible. Yeah, you need everybody around you
Yeah,
keeping
yeah,
updated with everything. So okay,
yeah.
well, so there are no any more questions. So I think we can come to an end here. So well, thank you very much once again, Martin,
Yeah,
for
thank you
this.
too for having me.
No, thank you for this interesting webinar and sharing all your knowledge and expertise.
You're welcome.
And thank you everyone for attending or watching this webinar. And I invite you to join our next webinar series, which will be next academic year, starting back in September, October, since today was the last one for this academic year. So thank you very much, Martin, and bye everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.